"Take your son to play at the neighbors. My sisters are coming over today," said my mother-in-law on her birthday. I pretended to ask the neighbors to watch my son from my first marriage, but at the height of the celebration, I took the floor, after which everyone's jaws dropped. I never thought I'd become the daughter-in-law who makes scenes at family gatherings. I always considered myself a diplomat, capable of finding common ground, even with the most difficult people. But that day, at my mother-in-law Barbara's 62nd birthday, something in me snapped. Perhaps it was the last drop in a sea of injustice, or maybe it was simply time to stop pretending that everything was fine. Whatever it was, what happened changed our family forever. It all started ordinarily, with a request that sounded perfectly innocent to outside ears, but cut me like a knife. "Ashley, dear," said Barbara, poking her head into the kitchen where I was finishing preparing her favorite roast beef, "take your son to play at the neighbors. My sisters and their husbands are coming over today. This will be an adults-only evening." Your son, not Ethan, not my grandson. Always your son, as if Michael had nothing to do with him, as if my 9-year-old boy was some foreign element in the precious Morgan dynasty. "Of course, Barbara," I replied with the fake smile I had been perfecting throughout my 4 years of marriage to Michael. "I'll arrange it with the Johnsons." Michael, my husband, stood by the refrigerator, pretending to look for something interesting among his mother's diet cola and organic kefir supplies. I knew he had heard everything. I saw his shoulders tense, but instead of defending his family, he mumbled something vague about how maybe Ethan could have dinner with us and then go to his room to play video games. Barbara gave him that special look that I called the royal execution, a mixture of disappointment and authoritative disapproval, before which Michael always backed down. "Michael, don't be silly. Children should be with children, not among adult conversations about investments and real estate." Apparently, in her worldview, my son wasn't adult enough at 9 years old to sit at the table, but not an important enough family member to make an exception for. Michael gave in, as always. "I suppose you're right, Mom. Ashley will find somewhere to place Ethan." Place. As if we were talking about a stray kitten. I went upstairs, where Ethan was sitting on his bed assembling a Lego set. He was creating a complex model of the Empire State Building, and I was once again amazed at how smart and patient he was for his age. "Hey, engineer," I said, trying to keep my voice light and carefree. "How's the construction going?" "Almost finished the 63rd floor," he replied, not looking up from his work. Then he raised his eyes, and I saw in them an understanding that a 9-year-old child shouldn't have. "It's Grandma's birthday today, right? And she doesn't want to see me again?" My heart clenched. Ethan knew everything. Of course he knew. Children sense these things, no matter how we try to protect them. "Sweetie, Grandma will have a lot of guests. Boring adult conversations." "Mom," he interrupted me with that special tone he used when he knew I wasn't telling the whole truth. "It's okay. I understand. Grandma doesn't consider me a real grandson because I have a different dad. I figured it out a long time ago." I sat down next to him on the bed, feeling anger boiling inside me, not at Ethan, of course, at Barbara, at Michael, at myself for allowing this to continue for so long. "Ethan, listen to me." I took his hands, making him put down the constructor pieces. "You are an incredible child, smart, kind, talented. And if someone can't see that, it's their problem, not yours. Do you understand?" He nodded, but I saw doubt in his brown eyes, so similar to Michael's, though they weren't biologically related. "I try to behave well when Grandma is around," he said quietly. "I never interrupt, don't run around the house. I say, please, and thank you. But she still looks at me like I'm wrong." Something in me broke. I hugged him tightly, hiding my face in his dark hair so he wouldn't see the tears that had formed in my eyes. "You're perfect, Ethan. Just perfect. And today we're going to do something a little different. Instead of the neighbors, you'll go to Aunt Rachel's. Remember her?" "Of course." His face brightened. "She has a cool comic book collection and lets me eat ice cream before dinner." I laughed, wiping away my tears. "Exactly. And possibly, we'll have a special evening tonight. Do you trust me? 1,000,000%, he replied without hesitation. While Ethan was packing his backpack, I replayed in my head the events of the last 3 months that had led me to today's decision. It happened in March. Barbara asked me to find old family photographs for a slideshow for her birthday. Of course, I was given the honor of preparing the presentation, like all the other grunt work for the celebration. I was looking for albums in her office, a huge room, finished in dark wood, which looked more like a CEO's office than a home space. In the bottom drawer of the desk, under a stack of folders with financial documents, I came across an envelope made of thick paper. It looked old and worn, as if it had been opened and closed many times. I don't know what made me look inside, perhaps the fact that it was hidden so carefully, or maybe my eternal hope to find something that would help me understand this woman. Inside were letters from an adoption agency, dated 1983, a hospital certificate of a boy's birth, and a small black and white photograph of a newborn. I was so shocked that I didn't immediately hear Barbara's footsteps in the hallway. Barely managing to return the envelope to its place, I pretended that I had just found the photo albums I was looking for. This discovery haunted me. Barbara Morgan, the perfect representative of Boston's elite, a woman who frowned at any mention of moral weakness, had an illegitimate child and gave him up for adoption. A child whose existence, apparently, no one knew about. Not Michael, not the late Mr. Morgan, not even Barbara's sisters. I shared this with Rachel, my best friend since school days, who worked as a lawyer in a large firm. She helped me carefully inquire. We weren't trying to find this child, now an adult man. We just needed confirmation that I had correctly interpreted the documents I found. And confirmation was found. Barbara had indeed given birth to a son a year before her official marriage to Richard Morgan and gave him up for adoption, a child she had rejected for the sake of status and money. I didn't intend to use this information. Really, I didn't. Everyone has a right to mistakes of youth and personal secrets, but when Barbara once again made it clear that my son was an unwanted member of the family, something broke inside me. "Ready, Mom?" Ethan stood in the doorway with a backpack on his shoulder and his favorite book about dinosaurs under his arm. "I took those cookies I baked yesterday. Aunt Rachel loves them." I smiled. He always thought about others, a trait that Barbara seemed to completely ignore. "You're the best, you know that?" I kissed the top of his head. "Let's go tell Dad we're leaving." Michael was waiting for us downstairs, nervously fiddling with his car keys. "I can drive you," he offered. "I need to stop by the office for documents for Mom. Documents for Mom." Mom was always the priority. I knew he felt guilty about the situation with Ethan, but not enough to change anything. "This is a family business, Ashley," he would say every time I raised the issue. "You don't understand. Mom controls everything since Dad's death. If I go against her, especially now with the museum project at stake." The museum project, the architectural complex that Michael had been developing for the past 2 years, his chance for professional recognition. I understood his ambitions. After all, we all want to succeed in our careers. But at what cost? "We'll be fine on our own," I replied. "You need to help your mom with the preparations." As we were leaving, Michael caught my hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know this isn't fair. I'll talk to her after the birthday." I had heard this "after" hundreds of times already. After Christmas, after her surgery, after an important meeting with investors. There was always a reason to postpone the unpleasant conversation to an indefinite later. "Sure," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Later." Rachel's house was a 20-minute drive away in a more democratic district of Boston. It was a small but cozy apartment, filled with books, vintage posters, and a collection of comics that many adult fans would envy. "My favorite nephew!" exclaimed Rachel, opening the door. With her bright red hair gathered in a messy bun and freckles all over her face, she was the complete opposite of the prim Barbara. Come in. I have a new issue of Spider-Man and blueberry pie-flavored ice cream." Ethan beamed and immediately slipped inside. leaving Rachel and me alone. "You look determined," she noted, studying my face carefully. "Is this the day?" I nodded. "She made me take Ethan to the neighbors, said today was an adults-only evening." Rachel clicked her tongue. "What a... Rachel!" I nodded toward the room where Ethan had already settled in with a comic book. "Sorry," she lowered her voice. "But you know I'm right. So, have you really decided?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, today I'm using what we found out. I can't watch her hurt my son anymore." Rachel squeezed my hand. "I'll support you, whatever happens. If you need a divorce lawyer..." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," I interrupted her. "I don't know how this will end. Maybe Michael will finally take our side." Rachel looked skeptical, but remained silent. Instead, she pulled an envelope from her desk drawer. "Here are additional copies of the documents we found, and printouts of public birth records. It's all legal, nothing that couldn't be found if you knew where to look." I took the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands, both literally and figuratively. "Thank you. I hope I won't need to use them." "But you will," Rachel said gently. "We both know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have brought Ethan here and wouldn't have worn your best suit." I looked down at my dark blue pantsuit that I had chosen this morning. She was right. Subconsciously, I had been preparing for battle. "I'm scared, Rach," I admitted. "What if I mess everything up? What if Michael never forgives me? What if you do nothing and Ethan grows up thinking there's something wrong with him, that he's not good enough for his family? What is Michael's love worth if he doesn't defend his son?" She was right. I knew it. Before leaving, I hugged Ethan tighter than usual. "Whatever happens tonight, remember, I love you more than anything in the world, and Dad loves you too." "I know, Mom," he replied with that childlike confidence that always made me believe everything would be all right. "Good luck with the dragon." Dragon. That's what we sometimes jokingly called Barbara when we were alone. I laughed, despite the lump in my throat. "Thank you, my knight." Returning to the Morgans' house, I felt my determination growing. For 4 years, I had tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law. 4 years pretending not to notice Barbara's contempt. 4 years hoping that Michael would find the courage to defend us. Enough. By the time I returned, the guests had already gathered. Barbara's 3 sisters with their husbands, several close family friends, her personal assistant from the company. Michael met me in the hallway, raising an eyebrow questioningly. "Are the Johnsons okay? Ethan wasn't too upset?" "Ethan is at Rachel's," I replied calmly. And no, he wasn't upset. He's used to his grandmother not considering him part of the family. Michael went pale. "Ashley, now is not the time." "When is the time, Michael?" I lowered my voice, but couldn't hide the bitterness. "When Ethan turns 18 and moves to college, never knowing what it's like to be loved by his grandmother? You're being unfair. Mom is just old-fashioned. Blood ties are important to her. And to you? You've been his father in everything but biology. You've been there since he was 4. You taught him how to ride a bike, read to him at night, took him to the hospital when he had chickenpox. But you allow your mother to treat him like an outsider." Michael ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that always betrayed his nervousness. "Please, not today. It's her 62nd birthday. All her sisters are here. I promise, we'll talk about this tomorrow." I almost laughed at the bitter irony. Another tomorrow in the endless series of postponed conversations. "Of course," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Let's not ruin the celebration." In the living room, Barbara was seated in her favorite chair, which resembled a throne, receiving congratulations and compliments. She wore an elegant dark green dress that accentuated her still slender figure and a pearl necklace that Michael and I had given her that morning. "And here's Ashley," she exclaimed with that special intonation that might have seemed warm to an outsider, but I heard the hidden contempt. "Dear, you missed the aperitif. I hope the neighbors aren't too busy with Ethan?" "Ethan is in good hands," I replied evenly. "No need to worry." Barbara nodded, clearly pleased that the problem was resolved, and returned to her story about how her daughter Caroline had recently given birth to the first real grandchild of the Morgan family. I gritted my teeth, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. The celebration proceeded as expected. Impeccable food, expensive wine, conversations about investments and real estate, exactly as Barbara had predicted. From time to time, Michael cast worried glances at me, but I just smiled and maintained small talk with Barbara's sister's husband, a surprisingly pleasant man who seemed to feel as uncomfortable here as I did. After the main course, Michael stood up with a glass in his hand. "Mom," he began, and his voice, usually uncertain in Barbara's presence, sounded warm and sincere. "Today I want to thank you for everything you've done for me, for supporting my career, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." He took a small box from his pocket. "Ashley and I already gave you pearls this morning, but I have something else." Barbara opened the box and gasped with delight. "Tickets to Hamilton! Michael, darling, you remembered." "Best seats," he said proudly. "First row orchestra, just as you always wanted." Barbara stood up and hugged her son tightly, demonstratively ignoring me, although Michael had just said, "Ashley and I." However, I knew that these tickets were his personal initiative. He had never even mentioned them to me. Everyone applauded, and Barbara, flushed from champagne and delight, began to talk about how long she had dreamed of seeing this musical. At that moment, I felt something inside me finally harden. The decision that had been brewing all evening became inevitable. I stood up and lightly tapped my silver fork against the edge of my glass. The sound spread across the room, drawing attention. The conversations died down, and everyone turned to me. "I would also like to say a few words," I began, feeling my heart pounding, but keeping my voice steady and calm. "Barbara, when Michael and I first started dating, I was struck by what a wonderful family you have. Such traditions, such unity. I always dreamed of a large family, perhaps because I grew up with just my mother." Barbara smiled condescendingly, obviously thinking this was a typical flattering toast. "And you know what impressed me the most? How Michael talked about his mother, with such respect, with such love. He told me that you raised him to value family above all else, to be honest, to accept people as they are." I paused, taking a sip of champagne. Michael tensed, sensing the change in my tone. "That's why I couldn't understand for so long why you don't accept my son. A child whom Michael loves as his own. A boy who calls him dad and looks at him with such adoration." I thought, maybe it seems that way to me. Maybe I'm too sensitive. But today, when you asked me to take my son to the neighbors so that he wouldn't interfere with adult conversation, I realized that I can no longer pretend. The room became very quiet. Barbara's sisters exchanged glances. Michael went pale. "Ashley," he began, but I shook my head. "No, Michael, let me finish." I turned back to Barbara, who was looking at me with growing anger. "I thought for a long time about what to give you for your birthday. Something that would help you understand the value of every child in the family. And, I found something interesting." I opened my purse and took out the envelope that Rachel had given me. "When you asked me to find photos for the slideshow, I accidentally came across documents in your office." I pulled out a copy of a birth certificate. "A birth certificate of a son you gave birth to in 1983 and gave up for adoption." The room exploded with shocked gasps. Barbara's sister's jaws literally dropped. Robert, the husband of the eldest sister, suddenly straightened in his chair, his gaze becoming sharp and attentive. Barbara turned white, then red. Her hand gripped the armrest of her chair so that her knuckles turned white. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You were rummaging through my personal things." "I was looking for albums for your slideshow at your request," I replied calmly. "And I found proof of your duplicity. You preferred to give up your own child to maintain your reputation before marrying an obscenely rich man. But why do you make my son suffer, who is innocent and has nothing to do with your dark past?" Michael was stunned, shifting his gaze from me to his mother. "Mom, is this true? Do I have a brother?" Barbara rose sharply, her face distorted with rage. "This is an invasion of privacy. How dare you make scenes in my home? Michael, control your wife." I expected Michael to do what he always did, try to smooth things over, apologize for me, try to calm everyone down, but he stood motionless, still processing this information. "You never told me," he finally said. "All these years, I had a brother I didn't even know about." Unexpectedly, Robert, the husband of Barbara's eldest sister, stood up. He was a tall, imposing man in his 60s, with gray temples and penetrating blue eyes. Always a man of few words, he preferred to stay in the shadow of his more extroverted wife. "Barb, enough," he said quietly but firmly. "This has gone too far." Everyone turned to him, including Barbara, whose face reflected something akin to panic. "Robert, don't. I need to." He interrupted her. "I've been silent for too long, indulging your pride." He looked at me, and in his gaze was a strange mixture of sadness and gratitude. "Ashley is right. And yes, Michael, you do have a brother. His name is Daniel. He's 39 now. He's a math teacher in Portland. He has 2 children, your nephews and nieces, whom you've never heard of." The bomb exploded. Barbara's sisters began talking over each other, demanding explanations. Michael looked as if he had been punched in the gut, and I couldn't believe that my plan had taken such an unexpected turn. "You knew?" Barbara finally shouted, looking at Robert. "All this time?" Robert nodded. "I've known from the very beginning, Barb. I was there, don't you remember? When you found out you were pregnant? When you decided that the child would interfere with your plans to marry Richard Morgan?" Robert's voice suddenly became full of pain, as if someone had thrust a knife into his very heart. "I was there, with you, when you decided everything for us." And then I understood. Robert had been in love with Barbara. Perhaps he was even the father of that child. But why then did she choose Richard? "You helped her hide this?" Michael asked, addressing Robert. "Not just hide," he replied. "I helped financially support Daniel all these years. Anonymously, through a trust fund. Your mother didn't want anything to do with the child, but I couldn't simply forget about him." "You betrayed me," Barbara whispered, looking at Robert with hatred. "You promised never to tell." "I promised not to tell Richard," Robert objected, "and I kept my word, but I never promised that I would remain silent when you started mistreating other people's children because of your own sinfulness, Barb." Michael seemed to wake from his shock. "Wait, I don't understand. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why couldn't we, I don't know, keep in touch with him?" "Because she was afraid that Richard would find out," Robert explained. "Your father was very conservative in family matters. Adopting a child wouldn't have bothered him, but Barbara, giving birth before marriage, hiding it, and abandoning her own flesh and blood, that could have destroyed their relationship. He wasn't even particularly concerned about who she got pregnant with. It was Richard, and Barbara was too valuable a trophy to brush aside." "So that's why you don't accept Ethan," I whispered, suddenly realizing. "He reminds you of your own rejected child." Barbara didn't answer, but her face spoke for itself. I had hit the mark. "My God, Barbara," sighed one of her sisters. "We thought you were studying in France then. You hid this from all of us?" "What else could I do?" Barbara snapped. "Disgrace the family? Bury my future? I did what I had to do. In those days, giving birth out of wedlock was the height of shame." "Just like with Ethan," I noted. "You did what you thought was necessary, erased him from the family because he reminds you of your shame." Barbara turned to me, her eyes shooting daggers. "You know nothing about my life, about my decisions. You came into this family 5 minutes ago, dragging along a child from another man, and you think you can judge me?" "Enough." Michael raised his voice so that everyone fell silent. I had never heard him speak in such a tone, especially to his mother. "Mom, you're crossing all boundaries. Ethan is my son. Maybe not biologically, but in all other ways. I've been his father for almost 5 years, and I will be until the end of my days." "You're just confused," Barbara dismissed. "This woman is manipulating you. She wants your money, your social status." "Enough," Michael interrupted her again. "You're crossing the line. Ashley loves me, and I love her. And I love Ethan too. The only one manipulating here is you. For years, you've used the company to control me, and I allowed it. I stayed silent when you ignored Ethan at family events. I pretended not to notice how you pushed him out of family photos. I didn't stand up to you when you called him Ashley's son instead of your grandson. I couldn't believe my ears. Michael was finally saying what I had wanted to hear all these years, but at that moment, I didn't feel triumph, only deep sadness that it had come to this. "And what now?" Barbara asked with a bitter smirk. "You'll leave the company, give up your inheritance, all because of some boy who isn't even your blood?" For a moment, I was afraid that Michael would back down, that the threat of losing everything he had worked for would make him give in to his mother again. But he straightened up and looked her directly in the eyes. "Yes," he said simply. "If I have to choose between working at your company and my family, I choose family. Always. Aren't these the values you instilled in me?" He came over to me and took my hand. "We're leaving, Ashley, and I'm leaving the company too. My museum project has surely already been approved by the board of directors. They appreciated the work, not the last name. I can find another architectural firm that will give me a chance." Barbara turned pale. "You can't just leave. You have a contract. I'll sue. I'll disinherit you." "I think you should calm down, Barbara," Robert intervened. "In light of everything that has been revealed today, a public scandal is not in your interest." "Are you threatening me?" she hissed. "I'm just reminding you of reality," he replied calmly. "Michael is an excellent architect. He'll find work anywhere. But can you keep your clients if they find out how you treated your own son?" One of Barbara's sisters stood up and approached Michael and me, gently touching our backs. For the first time in so many years, I felt warmth from Michael's relatives. "Go," she said quietly. "We'll sort this out. Barbara needs time to comprehend everything." We left the house in deafening silence. Only once we were in the car could I breathe normally. "Are you okay?" Michael asked, starting the engine. "Are you?" I answered with a question. He was silent for a long time, driving out of the driveway. "I don't know," he finally said. "I feel too much all at once. Shock from the news about my brother, anger at Mom for her lies, disappointment in myself for allowing her to control me for so long, and relief. Strangely, I feel relief, as if I've dropped a heavy burden that I've been carrying for years." He looked at me. "I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner, Ashley. You and Ethan deserved better." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "The main thing is that you did it now." "Where are we going?" he asked. "To Rachel's, to pick up Ethan, and then, I don't know, maybe we'll get a hotel room for tonight. I don't think we can go back to your mother's house." "Never again," Michael said firmly. "We'll find our own place. I'll call a real estate agent tomorrow." He was silent and then added with unexpected determination, "And I want to find my brother, Daniel. I want to meet him, his children. If he agrees, of course." "Of course," I replied, feeling my heart tighten with love for this man who had finally become what I always knew he could be: strong, determined, loyal to his real family. 3 months later, we were sitting in a cozy cafe on the waterfront in Portland, Oregon. Ethan fidgeted impatiently in his chair, constantly glancing at the door. "When will they come, Mom?" he asked for the 100th time. "Soon, sweetheart," I replied, adjusting his collar. "Uncle Daniel wrote that they're on their way." Michael looked no less excited than Ethan. He constantly checked his phone as if afraid of missing a message. "What if he changed his mind?" he muttered. "What if he decided he doesn't want anything to do with a family that disowned him?" "He agreed to meet when you wrote to him," I reminded him. "And he responded to all your letters. He wants to meet you, Michael. Finding Daniel wasn't that difficult." After that memorable party, Robert contacted Michael and provided all the information about Daniel Collins, including his contact details. The first conversation was awkward. How do you explain to someone that you're his brother, whose existence he may not even have suspected? But Daniel knew. His adoptive parents had never hidden the fact of his adoption, and as he grew up, he conducted his own investigation out of simple curiosity. I knew about Barbara Morgan. He wrote in his first letter to Michael. I knew she had a son, just a couple of years younger than me, but I never tried to contact you because I didn't want to disrupt the life she had built. And also, it hurt to think that she preferred another son, you. This comment made Michael cry. She didn't prefer me, he replied. She just used us both differently. In the last few months, our lives had changed dramatically. Michael really did leave the family company despite all of Barbara's threats. To his surprise, several major clients followed him, impressed by his museum project, and a month later, he received an offer from a prestigious architectural firm in Portland, a position that allowed him to work on his own projects and gave him the creative freedom he had always dreamed of. We sold our share in Barbara's house. Fortunately, it was partially registered to Michael after his father's death. Then we bought a small but cozy house in a Portland suburb. Ethan quickly found new friends and, to our surprise, didn't seem to miss Boston at all. Here, no one pretends I don't exist, he said one day, with such genuine joy that my heart ached. Michael hadn't spoken to Barbara since that day. She had called several times, first with threats, then with attempts at manipulation, finally with awkward apologies. But Michael remained steadfast. When you're ready to acknowledge Ethan as your grandson and Daniel as your son, then we'll talk, he told her in their last conversation. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and we all turned. A middle-aged man entered, remarkably similar to Michael, the same dark hair with early gray at the temples, the same brown eyes, even the same manner of slouching slightly. Next to him walked an attractive woman with a short haircut, and behind them, 2 children, a boy about 12 and a girl around 10. Michael stood up, his face expressing a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Daniel? The man smiled, and it was also Michael's smile, a bit embarrassed, a bit mischievous. Michael? They looked at each other for several seconds, then simultaneously stepped forward and embraced tightly like brothers. I felt a lump rising in my throat. Ethan tugged at my sleeve, his eyes wide. Mom, they look so much alike, he whispered, louder than he intended. Everyone laughed, and the tension disappeared. Daniel introduced his wife Laura and the children, Jason and Emma. Ethan immediately bonded with Emma when it turned out that they both loved the same series of adventure books. While the children were talking, Daniel pulled a folder from his bag. I thought you might be interested, he said to Michael. These are letters from Robert Anderson. He wrote to me every year on my birthday, starting from my 18th. He never signed with his full name, just R.A., but in the last letter, after you contacted me, he revealed himself. Michael carefully took the folder. May I? Daniel nodded, and Michael opened the first letter. I read over his shoulder. Dear Daniel, you don't know me, but I've known you since birth. I was there when you were born, small, with a mop of dark hair and the loudest cry I've ever heard. I saw you for just a few minutes before they took you away, but I never forgot your face. Your biological mother cannot be a part of your life for reasons too complicated to explain in a letter, but I want you to know you were never forgotten. Every year on your birthday, I think of you and wonder if you're happy, healthy, if you found your place in the world. I hope your adoptive parents have given you all the love and support you deserve. I hope they told you that you weren't abandoned, but given away with hope for a better life. Perhaps someday our paths will cross. Until then, know that somewhere there is a person who always remembers you and wishes you only the best. Happy birthday, Daniel. R.A. Michael closed the letter, his eyes glistening with tears. All these years, he murmured. Robert always knew, always cared. He funded my college, Daniel said quietly, an anonymous trust fund. And when I got married, a check unexpectedly arrived for the first payment on a house. I always wanted to know who this mysterious benefactor was, and he only revealed himself after Barbara's party. God, Daniel. We lost so much time because of her pride, Michael said with a sad smile. I put my hand on his shoulder. But now our family is bigger. Jason, Daniel's son, suddenly turned to the window. Hey, Dad, there's some woman looking at us. Over there, across the street, by the blue car. We all turned. Barbara was standing on the other side of the street, as straight and elegant as always. Even from here, I could see how tense she was. She wasn't trying to hide or approach, just stood and watched. Is that her? Daniel asked, and his voice trembled. Barbara Morgan? Michael nodded, not taking his eyes off his mother. How did she find us? Robert, Daniel answered. He said he told her about our meeting, said she had a right to know. A right? I involuntarily raised my voice. After everything she did? I'm not saying she deserves forgiveness, Daniel said gently, but perhaps she wants to say something? We looked at Barbara through the cafe window. She still wasn't moving, as if waiting for some sign. What do you want to do? Michael asked Daniel. He was silent for a long time, looking at the woman who had given him life and then rejected him. I don't know, he finally answered. Part of me wants to meet her, hear her version of the story. Another part fears disappointment. Whatever you decide, Michael said, we'll support you. Daniel turned to his wife Laura, as if asking her opinion. She nodded encouragingly. I think we should invite her to join us, Daniel decided. Not for her sake, but for ours, to close this chapter, or maybe start a new one. The children, I began, concerned about how this potentially emotional conversation might affect Ethan and Daniel's children. We can take the children to the park across the street, Laura suggested. Give you three some privacy to talk. Michael called his mother, a brief, restrained conversation. Then Laura took the children away, despite their protests, especially Ethan's, who wanted to stay with us. You'll be perfectly fine with Laura, I said, hugging him, and we'll join you soon. Promise? He asked with concern in his eyes. Promise. I kissed his forehead. Go show Emma and Jason your new sneakers that glow in the dark. When the children had left, we moved to a more secluded table in the corner. I was about to leave, to let the brothers be alone with their mother, but Michael squeezed my hand firmly. Stay, he asked. You're part of this. Part of us. Barbara entered the cafe a minute later. She looked older than 3 months ago, more vulnerable, less sure of herself. Seeing Daniel, she froze for a moment. Her face reflected so many emotions simultaneously: shock at the resemblance, pain from the long separation, fear of rejection. He, like Michael, looked so much like her. Hello, she said quietly, stopping at our table. Thank you for agreeing to meet. No one offered her a seat, but she sat down anyway, straightening her back with the same regal dignity that I had always noticed in her. But now I saw that it was a mask hiding insecurity. I flew in yesterday, she said when the silence became unbearable. Robert gave me the cafe address. I wasn't sure I would have the courage to come. Why did you? Daniel asked, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. Barbara looked at him, and for the first time, I saw her icy facade completely crumble. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but she made no attempt to hide them. Because I lost one son 39 years ago, she said in a trembling voice, and the second one, 3 months ago. I don't want to die without trying. She didn't finish, but we all understood what she meant, without trying to fix what could still be fixed. Why did you give me away? Daniel asked directly. Because I was young, scared, and selfish, Barbara answered without hesitation. I was in love with Robert, but Richard Morgan offered me social status and financial security that I desperately wanted. When I found out I was pregnant, you chose status over your child, Michael finished, and obviously over love. Yes, she said simply, and every day of my life I regretted it, even if I never admitted it to myself. When you were born, Michael, I vowed never to make such a mistake again. I became authoritarian, controlling. I turned your life into an extension of mine, my company, my legacy, my reputation. And Ethan? I asked, unable to contain myself. Why did you reject an innocent child? Barbara looked at me, and there was genuine pain in her eyes. because every time I saw him, I remembered Daniel, a boy born out of wedlock, a boy I gave up. I took out my shame on him. I couldn't look at Ethan without the agonizing reminder of my worst deed. He's not to blame for anything, Michael said. Neither is Daniel, Barbara replied. Neither are you, only I am to blame. There was no self-flagellation or melodrama in her voice, just a tired acknowledgement of the truth she had denied for too long. Daniel looked at her for a long time, then said, I'm not going to say that everything is okay or that I forgive you. I don't even know you. But, he paused, gathering his thoughts. I grew up in a wonderful family. My adoptive parents loved me and gave me everything a child needs. I have a happy marriage, beautiful children, a job that brings me joy. I don't feel emptiness from not knowing my biological mother. Barbara slumped slightly but nodded, accepting his words. But, Daniel continued, now I want to get to know my brother and his family. He glanced at me with a warm smile. We'll sort things out with Robert later, just him and me, since all the facts point to him being my father. Basically, I want my children to know their cousins, and if you wish to be a part of this, Barbara, perhaps with time, we can find some form of relationship. Barbara looked as if she had just been given something precious that she had not expected at all. Thank you, she whispered. That's more than I deserve. Michael looked at his mother with a long, evaluating gaze. And what about Ethan? He asked directly. Can you accept him as your grandson? Truly accept, without reservations? Barbara didn't look away. I'll try, she said honestly. I can't promise I'll change overnight, but I want to try, for your sake, for my sake, and most importantly, for Ethan's sake, who has already suffered enough because of me. I felt conflicting emotions battling inside me, distrust of this woman who had caused so much pain to my son, the desire to protect Ethan from possible disappointment, but also a glimmer of hope. Perhaps people really are capable of changing, even those as authoritarian and proud as Barbara Morgan. Barbara stood up, understanding that the conversation was coming to an end. May I at least see the children from a distance? She asked with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Ethan and Daniel's children? Michael, Daniel, and I exchanged glances. After a brief silent communication, Daniel nodded. They're in the park across the street. We can go there together. We left the cafe and crossed the street. The children were playing on the playground, laughing loudly, while Laura watched them from a nearby bench. Ethan and Emma had clearly found common ground. They were spinning together on the carousel, while Jason tried to spin them even faster. Barbara stopped at the edge of the park, looking at this scene with a strange expression, a mixture of longing, regret, and timid hope. Ethan will be 10 soon, I said, standing next to her. He loves dinosaurs, construction sets, and adventure books. Recently, he's become interested in architecture, like Michael. He's kind, smart, and very forgiving. Much more forgiving than I am. Barbara turned to me, tears in her eyes. You love my son, she said, and it wasn't a question. More than life, I replied simply, and he loves your boy as his own. Yes, she nodded, as if making an internal decision. Then I will try my hardest to be the grandmother Ethan deserves. And you and I, maybe someday we can start over? I looked at this proud woman who, for the first time, appeared truly sincere. I wasn't ready to accept her with open arms. The memories of how she made my son feel unwanted were too fresh. But perhaps Daniel was right. Healing requires a first step. Maybe, I answered, with time. At that moment, Ethan noticed us and waved. Mom! Dad! Look how fast we're spinning! Michael and Daniel simultaneously raised their hands, greeting the children, and this synchronous movement, so similar in two brothers separated at birth, but who found each other after almost 40 years, made me smile through tears. Life is unpredictable. I didn't know what the future would bring. Would Barbara really be able to change and become a loving grandmother to Ethan? Would Michael and Daniel find a way to build a brotherly relationship after so many years apart? Would we all be able to create a new family from the fragments of the old one? But looking at Ethan happily playing with his newfound cousins, at Michael and Daniel standing shoulder to shoulder, I felt hope. Perhaps the most important lesson I learned from all this: it's never too late to stand up for those you love. It's never too late to tell the truth, and it's never too late to start anew. If you enjoyed the video, please support it with a like and a comment.